I don't believe for a second that if you had a friend of yours who like worked in a cryo lab and he fertilized eggs, and like you were talking with him one day at work and one of the eggs fell out of his hand and it hit the ground, right? That you would be like, dude, you just killed a person. If you believe that life starts at conception, if you were to fertilize, a female egg and then freeze it, do you have the same responsibility to that egg that you would to any other human life?
Well, in regard to not killing it, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so like if you were to run a laboratory, for instance, and let's just say you couldn't pay your electric bill, you know what I mean? Do you have some type of moral obligation to do so because you're protecting a human life at that point?
Yeah, I think you're actually onto something with that. Like if you're going to take on the responsibility of raising a bunch of human embryos in petri dishes in a lab, you better damn well make sure you can afford to maintain their lives in the environment that you're giving them. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of death on a lot of human death.
And do you think that if you were to like accidentally drop one of those fertilized eggs on the ground and it's done, did you just accidentally kill somebody in your viewpoint?
A human, yeah. I mean, like it logically follows that if human life begins at conception and you do something even incidentally to result in its death.
Okay, so I'm going to take issue with this real quick because I really don't believe for a second that if you had a friend of yours who like worked in a cryo lab and he fertilized eggs and like you were talking with him one day at work and one of the eggs fell out of his hand and it hit the ground, right? That you would be like, dude, you just killed a person. I have a hard time, like I really do. I have a hard time believing in my head, playing that scenario out, that you wouldn't just be like, oh, well, that sucks, and then just go about your day. I have a hard time believing you would just be like, oh my God, we got to have a funeral and fucking, you know what I mean?
Well, firstly, I would reject the premise of me being friends with somebody who would work in an environment like that. But
but why? There's nothing. There's nothing morally wrong with it, right? There's nothing morally wrong with freezing, freezing an egg and then having a surrogate mother. I don't see why that would be morally reprehensible at all. So, if let's just say theoretically, you were just chopping it up with a buddy of yours who worked there and he dropped it. You know what I mean? Don't you think that it's kind of absurd for the average person to believe that you'd be like, fuck, you just killed Fred, I mean,
putting a name on it is different, but like to call it absurd isn't really a defeater to the fact that it is a human, right? So simply, if we are simply to acknowledge, is this a human being that just died? Well, it necessarily follows if human life begins at conception.
I get the logic, and I'm not rejecting the premise. Okay. All I'm saying is that I understand also that in real-time application of things, it often flows different than how we theoretically perceive things. So in this particular case, I'm just struggling playing this scenario out where like you go visit your brother or whatever in a lab like that, and he like drops one of these fertilized embryos and you just are like, dude, you just fucking killed a guy. What the fuck is wrong? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you just go ballistic on it. Yeah, I struggle to believe that would be the case in real time. You know what I mean? That's all.
Well, it would depend on the intent. Like if he just like he's holding the petri dish and he trips and falls and it happens to spill out and die. Like, I mean, that sucks because a human died, but I'm not gonna like hold him to the fire and be like, oh my God, what have you done? But if he's like, I'm aware that this is a human being in this petri dish and I'm gonna dump it in the toilet. Okay, I'm like, dude, you just killed a human being. Yes, I would. You can not believe that all you want, but yes, I would react that way.
But you can see
what the hell is wrong with you? You just killed a human being.
You can see though where most people would struggle to believe that the average person would have a reaction like that, though, right?
I mean, I'm not the average person.
Well, right. I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying, like, if you play that out to its end, I just think that most people would be like, whatever kind of thing,
Yeah, it's more so, yeah. It's more so just establishing how do we logically conclude what is a human life more worth preserving than another, and I'm saying that in order to do that it must be entirely arbitrary. So I say don't value any one human life over another from conception to death,
No,
regardless
sure.
of what they're.
And the logical premise works. Don't get me wrong. It works
Mhm.
100%. I'm not rejecting any of it.
Mhm.
I'm just saying that I struggle with this one thing in my head, believing that the reaction would be like it would be if an actual baby just like died in front. You know what I mean? I just really
Well,
feel
yeah.
like the reaction would be totally different.